book. Obviously, you've published a book. It's not news. It's Fark. And other than racking up frequent flyer miles, how has that changed things for you, if at all?
Well, it's been really interesting. It didn't have, well, not necessarily that I was expecting it to have a huge impact, but it actually had much less of an impact than I would have thought from the standpoint of we couldn't get anybody to review this book, which was really interesting. I know a lot of people read it because they've emailed me. Jack Schaefer, who writes for, crap, I can't remember who it is now. It's either Slate or Salon. I get him confused, and he would kick my ass if he knew I missed this. I'm sure I'm going to hear about it. Well, basically, his postulation about it is that the media is too embarrassed to do a review on it because he said it's dead on. Basically, it's a book about media patterns, and it's about what media does to fill space when there's nothing going on, which is most of the time. And the real reason for that is that we're in a 24-hour news cycle right now. When back when you were working on television and radio broadcasts for the most part, and even newspapers for that matter, you had one edition or half an hour to an hour of news every single day, and so you could work on that all day long, compile it, get it out the door, and you're done. There really wasn't a lot of room for fluff or crap. I mean, if like 60 Minutes would put in Andy Rooney and kill a couple minutes at the end. He was the kind of the guy that rounded it out to an hour because segments are going to be as long as segments are, but Andy Rooney they can make as long or short as they need to. And, so there isn't a lot of room for crap in that, and you didn't see a lot of it showing up until you got into the 24-hour media cycle. And then when you got your CNNs coming along and whatnot, not that CNN is the top purveyor of crap or anything like that. That actually belongs to Fox. But in general, when they ended up needing to fill this space, they started having to go to these other types of stories and started getting into these ruts of these stories that would keep coming up over and over again. For example, one of the ones I talk about is media fear-mongering. Like actually last night, my mom popped up on IM and warned me that I had to get a vaccination against shingles. Like out of nowhere. You'd have to know my mom to because that's about 1,000 times funnier than even you could possibly imagine. But what happened was yesterday morning, NPR and I think the AP released an article about how most people don't know there's a vaccine against shingles and how horribly painful it is, and we all got to go out and get it right now because we're all bound to catch shingles and probably die a slow, painful death from it. Out of nowhere, it's that kind of thing. Well, the other one was on Thursday, ABC was doing one about how your house may be built on top of an old military firing range. And you could have bombs underneath your house right now waiting to go off and kill you and your family. That kind of crap, like stuff we really shouldn't be concerned about. I mean, yeah, it might be worth a look to see, ask your neighbor if you're built on top of an old military firing range. Strangely, the example they used was from Florida, which I would imagine probably is the state with the most subdivisions built on top of military firing ranges. But in general, we're talking about a lot of stuff like that, or, tornadoes is another favorite of mine. I mean, not that, I'd say go out in a tornado and stand out and wave at it or anything like that, but, tornadoes are not hurricanes. They've got a really, much smaller path. You're not likely to even, I've never even seen one in my entire lifetime, much less, been in one. Not to say that I don't know people who have, but the upshot of it is that when you look at the scale of things that's probably going to kill you, number one is what you had for lunch. And number two is the drive to the grocery store when somebody broadsides you at the intersection. I mean, that's the stuff we really ought to be worried about, and that just gets dropped. Because as human beings, we have this baseline for what we're willing to tolerate as far as, threats in our lives. It's interesting in Israel, for them, it's actually getting blown up at the local mall. A lot of people have just been like, well, what are you going to do? So they're, not to say they're not unconcerned about it, but at the same time, they just go about their daily lives and ignore it because that's what you do. Other patterns we've got are there's seasonal articles where they come around every single year. Like, for example, we're doing this interview just a week before the Super Bowl, and we're going to see an article come out next week about how many millions of dollars are lost in productivity to the Super Bowl every year. That's actually done by a company that's looking to get a free press release to get publicity, and every single year they've done it. Last 3 years running, they just took the last year's figure and added $20 million to it. It went 780, 800 million. It was 820 last year. So this year I predict it'll be 840, or maybe they'll run up to 850. They're just pulling that out of their asses anyway. If there was actually like a scientific formula, it would be different digits all the way across. But really, it's all about getting a press release, not about being right. So, and the media will happily run that because it's got something to do with the Super Bowl. What's funny is that just before that, we're going to have all the Groundhog Day stuff. Which I always find kind of amusing because, yeah, it's always fun, and it's neat that they pull this groundhog out of a hole and talk about it, but it's national news for a day. Something else is probably going out there somewhere, right? There's some Middle East stuff we could talk about. My favorite one, though, is the one where they start warning you about lawnmowers. Usually these warnings come out in April, which is way the hell too late for people that live in Kentucky or south of here, because we're already mowing our lawns. Like the beginning of March, the grass grows a foot tall every week, so you got to get out there and mow it down. And so April, when it starts growing tall in New York, CNN will release an APB alert. Don't stick your hand in a lawnmower. Well, no shit. But every single year they run it. And it's way too late for the Floridians who have been mowing their lawn since, time immemorial, because their grass grows year round. So they're kind of screwed. But, so talking about these media patterns and stuff like that, and I think, especially based on the title, I think a lot of media guys misinterpreted it as a slam on the media, because if you actually get in there, it isn't really a slam on the media. I mean, I don't appreciate the fact that this is in the media, but the reality of it is it's not in the media because they want to talk about it. It turns out you can't actually push issues in the media. Your audience will completely ignore them. Like, I feel really strongly about network neutrality. Nobody gives a rat's ass. And honestly, nobody should, because, I mean, it's a complicated subject. Most people don't really think it's going to impact them too much. And, okay, fine, I get that. Nobody cares. But it's interesting that you can't force that on people. Like, you can't say, hey, check out net neutrality, and they 4 million people check it out, and they're like, whatever, we don't care. Yeah. Nobody cares more than they would otherwise. And so what the media is reacting to is it's not that they're coming up with all this bullshit and they're basically putting it together. It's that this is what people click on. People click on stuff every time a movie star dies of a suicide, for a drug overdose. People click on Britney Spears' cooter. They will go after that stuff every single time like clockwork. And so the media eventually, this page view hungry industry that they live in is going to sit there and go, damn, we're kind of in the wrong industry. And while they really want to do news and cover stuff, they also want to, they also want to get the page views. And so there's this push-pull issue where basically they start moving into this gray area of stuff that kind of is news but kind of isn't. And the book that I wrote doesn't criticize the gray area. It basically says that you know that sometimes what news is, and sometimes what news isn't, and there's a gray area, and you can't say this definitely is or this definitely isn't, but sometimes you definitely know it's not news. Don't run this stuff in the news. And that's basically what the book is about, because sometimes they stray a little too far.